Well, hey, good morning,
Oops.
boys.
Hey,
How are
good
we doing
morning.
today?
Good.
I took
How
my
are you?
headset.
What's that?
I said I took my headset out and got into a discussion on WhatsApp during the countdown.
Um,
Oops.
well,
Good morning.
going good. Just gonna give everyone a heads up here. It looks like we have all sorts of potential external factors coming into play this morning. A thunderstorm just rolled through, or is rolling through, and I had my lights flicker like 5 seconds before the transition. And Kevin, you've been having intermittent download issues, yeah, or internet
Yeah,
issues.
yeah. I got on this morning and everything was delayed. I did a speed test. I was down at like 35, I think, on either the upload or the download. It feels like it's fixed itself now, but I had to call my neighbor that was their washing machine was, telling Samsung that
Ah,
they were washing blue jeans or something. So
sure, that requires terabytes of data at this point. So,
thanks, Curtis, for setting that one up this morning.
Yeah. You're welcome.
hey, good to see you, Curtis. Curtis, this is your second time back on the show. Um, uh, thanks for joining us today. Do you want to introduce yourself to everyone in case people weren't here last week?
Yeah. Well, my name's Curtis, out of Atlanta. I've been in the Microsoft Azure Power BI space for a while now. I've been helping out companies, small startups to large enterprise public companies, get their data ready. For specifically, I focus a lot on the financial reporting and getting that ready for customers and clients.
Oh,
So
that's fantastic. And I'll say the big thing that Curtis has done is, and why he's here, and what the subject for today is. Curtis is the author of PyTabular, which is the first Python based framework for managing your tabular model inside of notebooks. Curtis, you were like, correct me if I'm wrong on this story, but you were faced with like managing like 180 gig semantic model out in the service, and there was just all sorts of challenges and issues with that. And so that led you, and you had what, an 8 gig notebook at the time, so like,
yes. Yeah. My computer was I had like 8 gigs of RAM that was working for me, and nothing gets your heart pumping like an incident on quarter a month end with an 8 gigs of RAM, trying to refresh and work with 180 gigs above model. So so you had to get a little bit flexible, and Python lets you do that, and
uh,
that's why I built it.
well, that's fantastic. So we're going to share your Git repo. At the time when you built this, I know I was really impressed with it. I called up some of my friends at Microsoft, said, "Hey, you should see what this guy is doing with Python and tabular models." And I can remember in that meeting, you got 3/4 of the way through the presentation, and they suddenly interrupted us and said, "Hang on, none of this is data science. We thought this was going to be all data science. What are like, this is all data engineering." They were like, they were awed and shocked. They never even considered this as a possibility, and um, that led to what, a series of like 2 to 4 hour like meetings with them
Mhm.
to like show them the glory and the wonder of that. And that was about 5 years ago, right?
Yeah,
That
I
about
mean,
right?
it's a classic problem, especially when enterprises grow and grow. If you have an army of data engineers, an army of analysts, there can oftentimes be a communication gap. I mean, that's quite literally almost why that analytics engineering kind of role is starting to
Hmm.
come out. And so that bridge is very important. Oftentimes a data engineer will look at their tables in Fabric or Databricks or wherever and say, "Hey, data looks good to me," and all they needed to do is refresh the semantic model. But there might be that disconnect sometimes, depending on how your org is set up. And so that is just one of the. I like to think of it as it's a communicator sometimes, and it bridges. It's glue. So
So
Well,
I'm sure we'll get more into it, but what would you think was the first thing, like was it partitioning some of your larger tables? Was it, you brought up some of the problems, but what do you
yeah,
think was your very first thing that kind of got you going down this road?
Well, so it's a simple check too. As much as we like to think our data environments are beautiful, oftentimes you never know what you're going to run into. And so, like, I had an issue once where we kept refreshing blank tables,
Hmm.
and no matter. And so, I just wanted a simple check: if row count greater than 0, refresh.
Gotcha.
And so you think it's so simple, but sometimes you got to get a little flexible depending on what you have access to and what you don't. Um, there's the concept of like chaos engineering. I'll get a little
Hmm.
fancy here, but like you can go and you can point at those blank tables that are getting truncated, and you can say, hey, fix your stuff, don't ever truncate again. Or you can make it so your side of the house is more resilient to it, so it doesn't matter if it's blank or not, we can handle it. And so that's kind of a philosophy that I try to stick to.
Gotcha.
So it's more it can deal with those kind of things.
Yeah. So in that case, what you're doing is like there was something wrong. Something went wrong that the data engineering path didn't find. So the source table was empty, and
Right.
you didn't want to empty out your model with that refresh.
Right. Yeah, because a
Yeah.
classic semantic model too, if it's just happy got it done in seconds, because it
Yeah.
refreshed 0 rows. So the needed some kind of check in there.
Hmm.
Um, as basic as it is, it can save you incidents. If you imagine this happening at a enterprise public company and it's quarter month in, and you just blank did a whole blank on their sales or their revenue or whatever your fact
Right.
table is. So even if ideally you're not doing a full load on that, but maybe it's a partition and you just got rid of their whole current year, current month, or however you've got it set up. So
Well, and those things can really happen when you're talking about very large tables, very large processes downstream, right? You've got, automation that runs through and says, oh, load this stuff into my gold, and then, it's going to kick off all these jobs. And when I get, complete back, kick off my model refresh. Well, you can get complete back while those things are still writing and while locks are still in place, so that when you go to query it, if it's instantaneous, right? If it's so quick after that, while that lock is still in place, you end up with that, right? And
mhm,
um, just even having that check of is there data can ensure that you've waited for that uh um that lock to be removed and for that data to flow in, right?
right. Yeah, I've done enough incidents in the middle of the night that I like to sleep. So, it's very much worth it to, have those checks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of it. I know sometimes it's worth it, even if it adds an extra second to your pipeline. Just check it and just be a little safer. And also too, you can start to show the business end of like, hey, look at all these checks we have. Look at all the things that we've got going. That does wonders for getting that buy-in of the data.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. All right. Well, good morning to everybody in the chat. It's good to see you here. If you're here, like, let us know, where are you at? What do you got going on this weekend? Before we get into this topic, want to make sure we just do a little touch base with everybody. I know I've got today is a what do we call it?
Holiday.
No, what do we call it? Oh,
Some people
disconnect
just
days.
call it a holiday. Yeah, you
Yeah,
guys are
yeah,
calling it a disconnect days. Others
yeah,
are
yeah.
calling it a holiday.
Oh, yeah, we call them disconnect days because as an organization, we look for like those long stretches where there are no holidays or no big things, and we try to, as a company, say, okay, hey, we're all going to take this day off, and so there's less conflicts of meetings and less things that are like in place. So, uh, what it really means for me is that I'm going to get caught up on paperwork today. So. I have a few expense reports I'm going to be doing. Uh, Curtis, what you got going on this weekend?
You're looking at it.
Okay.
I'm Yeah, excited to be here. I got to clean out a shed. I know it's pretty riveting, but we just got the new roof on the shed, so
Mm,
I'll have to clean that out and make some room for storage. So it's a nice
awesome.
all that manual labor is a nice reminder to not get fired.
Yeah, and not buy crap. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Kevin, you got anything interesting going on this weekend?
Not much. Just some relaxed time, some downtime. Got a theater show I'm going to tonight. We go to a community theater about once a month, and so that show is tonight. And that's really about it. Just gonna relax a little.
Oh, awesome. And it looks like we got all sorts of people doing fun stuff. Salesforce migrations. Ooh, Stina, that's super fun. Belinda's flying home from Houston. Donald's researching decision supports and
Probably
Peter
finding more
Nicholson's.
books.
What's that?
He's probably going to find more books to add to his stack.
There you go. I'm sure, right? And we have one last thing where Peter's doing an ERP migration. So Godspeed to all of you intrepid warriors and travelers out there. So I can't not hide that. There we go. All right. I think we've got enough like jibber jabber. Like we've framed up the session. Curtis, you want to show us like how PyTabular works?
I'm excited. Let's do it.
All right.
So to get started, we've got a riveting console for you guys. It's nice and black, but this is where I will start to show what it can do. We'll go right into the code for it. And then a quick check on the size. Should I go bigger, Chris?
This looks pretty good.
Yeah, it looks good.
All right. So the first thing we do, we summon the glue of the internet and we call in Python. And then now I'm in. And so big fan of Python. They're teaching it to kindergartners these days. So if you don't know it, I highly recommend to dive in and just have some fun with it. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the package. I won't go into how you download it or anything like that, but it is available through pip. So you can just import PyTabular, and I'm going to give it just the letter P as a variable. So it's doing a lot here. So one of the key things, like if you've ever used DAX Studio, Tabular Editor, which I'm sure most of you have on this stream, you gotta access the .NET libraries to be able to get those models, and that's exactly what this does.
Curtis,
so
can I pause you for 1 second because the chat
please.
there's like 3 or 4 people. Chris, you missed the rules, and
I got the rules up now. Sorry.
The rules are down below. I think they want to hear them. So,
okay.
You know.
Rules. This is for you. Please, if you have questions, post a Q colon. We'll get that up. Please don't spam. You'd be the first if you did it today. So let's just not do that. And yes, but all right. Back to
everybody's
back.
Yeah.
Cool. We got the rules.
I think we're good.
All right.
Yeah.
The world is right again.
Yeah. So what I've done is import the package, and I'm going to import OS so I can get a connection string. But same rules apply here, right? When you go into DAX Studio, you go into Tabular Editor, and you click the connect to a database, and you've got to find that connection string. That's what this is going to do. So I'm going to create a variable here. I'm going to call it model equals p.tabular. So this is my main tabular class, and I'm going to get a little secret connection string in here and just call it demo. And then we will go from there. And then I'm going to start to connect. I think my least favorite thing in the Microsoft world is authenticating. And so this is can sometimes be a pain to find that connection string, make sure you have the right level of access and things like that. But that's all this is doing. Get your service principal in there. I can show a little bit later in the browser where you can get a base connection string for your data set, and you can just connect with MFA if you wanted to give it a test run. So we're in. We are now connected to the model via Python. So now the world opens up to us. I've made some pretty printing here so you can kind of see it when you're in the command and you're in the console, and you get a little more insight here. And one of the goals too is to make this very Pythonic. So if I just say model.tables, boom, I get a list of tables right there. And so you can use it via dictionary. So I can say, I want to see internet sales. And then as I keep chaining this along, I now have info on the table. The name, the hidden number of columns, partitions, members, description, etc. All in Python. Now, to have some fun here, let's immediately get to it. as Chris said, with 180 gigs, you're not refreshing that whole thing at once. So oftentimes I have to isolate tables or partitions. So to try to keep it as intuitive as possible, because it's Python, it should be easy to read. It should be like English, .refresh. So I got model.tables internet sales .refresh. And then what you'll start to see is what's happening in the background is a few things. There's a trace that's running. So a trace gets spun up and it gets started, and then it's capturing all of the logs from the refresh. How many rows, the compressions. It'll spit out warnings to you if you have like an encoding issue in your columns and things like that. And then it'll save it and spit out, and then there you go. We're in. And so then we're all refreshed. And we say, okay, great. What you also see here is you see a test. So Kevin, what we were talking about a little earlier is I just wanted to check, I do a row count before and I do a row count after. There's a concept that I built into here of what I just call pre-checks. So by default, you just get a row count, but you can customize this. You can say like, hey, I want to check internet sales before the measure internet sales before and after a refresh to make sure I'm not changing any business logic. And so it's fully customizable. But out of the box, you should be able to just refresh and say, hey, did I refresh a blank table? And if you do, it'll spit out some issues, which is nice.
Yeah, I guess where I always struggle on trying to come up with those type of tests, like testing the measure, you're bringing in new fact rows, right? So if you're looking at, say, the current day, you expect it to change, right? So you almost have to kind of look back a day or two,
Yes.
right? And kind of have a known value because you don't know the value for the current day. But
Correct.
then you still got to at least kind of check to say, is your current day within a certain range or something like that? And those are some of the things that I don't know if this could help me put something like that in as well.
Yeah, or sometimes too, it's just saying, hey, do we actually have sales for the current period?
Right.
Very basic test. Oftentimes a use case I find in here is I'll mix PyTabular with the PyTesting framework.
Okay.
And so, you mix those two together. So every time I deploy change to the model, or every time, even after refresh, let's go through all this business logic. One of my favorite things about financial data, right, is previous months don't change. Once they're closed, they're closed. So you can start to hard code those values of previous months and making sure, like, when you make big changes to the model, that you're not impacting previous months. Nothing will drive a finance person crazier by doing that. So you can always try to ensure that everything's tying out. Okay. So we're in here and we've got the model, right? As I showed, you can chain it around. You can do tables. I can go, I typed in internet sales, but you notice there's indexing numbers there too. So I can go 13 and I get the same internet sales because it's right there. So either way, but now you can have some fun. So I could go to tables, internet sales, and let's see, are there any measures in here? It looks like there are. So I can type in measures, and now I have all my internet sales measures. And I could, and it's very common in models to have a ton of measures. You're like, this is ridiculous. I don't want to look at this. So I want to find anything that I'm going to go measures.find continues, and I'm just going to say anything that has average in it, and it'll filter it down for me. So you can continue to chain and go through it. I can look at the columns here. And I say, okay, cool. I got columns in this. Let's go back to tables and let's look at product. So I'll type that in, or I'll just do 6. And then let me look at the columns. And then I say, okay, there's a lot here. Let's look at the style. Column style 18. And then I've got some helper methods in here. Let me get the values of this. So now what it'll do is it'll do a DAX query. And so in this, I've got the column values, and then if I'll save this as a variable real quick. So A, and let me get the type of that. That's a pandas data frame. So DAX queries in PyTabular will convert the results into a pandas data frame. And then it also does its best too, like if you are outputting an individual value, you'll get the NumPy version of that. So I'm in model. All I got to do is query, and I can just go, and you need a full DAX statement. So for those of you that are just messing in the measures, right, that's not giving the full story of DAX. If you ever go to, when you view the performance and you see the full query, you see the evaluate and then define and variables and return. That's what it's expecting. So you give it a full evaluate. And then in this case, let's just return a measure, internet sales. Did I do it right? Sales cannot be determined. Let's find model.measures.find, and let's see, enter.
It's very colorful when it has an error, right? So
That's what I try to do it. So we'll do internet sales freight. Let's see if that returns. Model.query evaluate value, and then
so I just want to take just a second to call out that Christina is now committed to bringing Scotcheroos to conferences. So when you see Christina at conferences, she will have Scotcheroos with her because they're easy for her to have. So
all right.
Sorry, keep going.
I don't know what Scotcheroos are.
That's how this whole thing started. I didn't know what they were either. So apparently it's peanut butter Rice Krispies with a chocolate butterscotch fudge on top. Amazing and delicious. Egg and gluten-free.
Oh, that sounds great. Okay, so I've got a query now, and if you notice, I'm just getting the raw measure. I'm not putting any filters in this, but you can get as fancy as you want. And then I can do model.query. So then you say, okay, that's great. What are the use cases there? Oftentimes you may have an army of row level security. RLS may be very big for your company. So it's a common use case to just spam through a bunch of users. So what I'll do is I can add an argument in here called effective user, and I'm going to equal, and then let's get Chris in here.
Here we go.
At bakertilly.com, and then I'll run that. And now what it's doing is it's creating another connection, but as Chris cool. This time. And so if I had row level security in this model, it would filter it down. And so you're in Python, so you can just for loop, if you want to get fancy, you can start threading it out, but you don't need to get fancy. Just for loop through everything and then just check your RLS that way. So,
and the big thing that's useful here is that you can, because you're in Python, because you can now use two IDs. You can, as an administrator, you can query the people who are in like one of the groups, right? Like, okay, hey, give me someone who's in the manager role and show me what they should have access to at that level, and then go in and say, now show from their perspective, is that what they have access to? And you can now actually see that and do that validation to ensure that your row level security not just has been defined, but it's being enforced appropriately. Because we've had situations in the past where, whoops, someone made a change to the model, and now all of a sudden, row level security got the statement that you had in place is no longer filtering the way it's intended to, and now you have a breach of security, and you don't know about it until someone reports it, unless you have this in place. And then you can definitively say as you go along, not only do you have row level security in place, but you've been able to test all of your deployments and like everything that's going on, that you never have a conflict there, or you never have a gap.
And so to add on to this query method in the model.query, tried to make it pretty flexible. Like as you saw, you can impersonate users with it. You can do DAX queries. You can do DMV queries with it as well. So if you really want to get into the weeds and start to have some logic, you can utilize that as well. It'll also read files. So you don't have to open up the file and read the text or anything like that. We just recently implemented for a client where we've got kind of going back to the use case of PyTest and PyTabular, where we'll loop through a bunch of DAX files that we're ensuring equal a certain business logic so we can make changes faster, not worry about breaking the past values. And so that's what we've put in. And, we're running 500 tests in seconds. DAX is fast, so you can just loop through it and get all the results and get your business logic. And then two, if you've ever done validation with the business and getting their buy-in, it's a great way to say, hey, not only did it pass this deployment, but we'll check it for every single one in the future. So that's that. The next thing for it is to kind of, I think what I'll do is I'll showcase one more thing. So let's say you want to be more specific about, your refreshes. So I go to the tables internet sales. I've got that here. I can do model.tables internet sales, and then I can do related. And I can do the related method, and I'll easily get a result of all the tables that are related to that star. So a common use case there is when you have multiple stars in your data set, and you need to just say, hey, I just need to refresh this one. It's a very easy way to simplify it and just say, hey, give me that table dot related, and then get the results. And then what I can do from here is dot refresh, and then I will get those items. So
wait a minute. So you just have to do dot refresh results or related, or how does
just
that
dot
work?
refresh. So
Wow.
there's the classes, the naming convention I gave it. So like what you're looking at in that bottom box is your tables, right? So I tried my best to be very Pythonic with it. So if I do model.tables, I've got
I
a
love
list
that
of
word.
tables
I don't
here.
think I've heard it before.
Pythonic?
Pythonic.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can, and it should be fully like indexable. You can, if I look at this in classic like Python, is there a way, Chris, to show the bottom left when I'm typing? Do you know in the screen? If not,
I've been trying to get your name off of that the whole live stream. I have an open ticket with the help desk of Restream to try and get that off.
let me do this. I'll do model.tables, and then I can go from, let's say, I just want to go 0 to 10. And so if you look at that command I just did, model.tables, and then I can go there, but I want to stop at the 10th one of the index, right? So it's fully, and you can have fun with it in the same way you can with Python. But to your comment, Chris, yeah, so I should be able to just do model.tables, and let's say I'm going to find internet. And so now I've got the internet sales table, and I can do that same thing, and I can get related. Sorry. I can get related. And there you go.
Wow. And then what's the command to just refresh those tables?
Dot refresh.
Okay. Wow.
And so we showed right in the beginning too, we showed a refresh of the account table.
Yeah.
And it took off no problem. The cool thing about the refreshing is the tracing. That is my favorite thing about it. So you get all the results. I believe Tabular Editor will show this data, and they show it like in one box when you're refreshing, and you see a bunch of text going really fast. That is what this is. It shows you when you're building hierarchies, it's got to make the relationships, it's got to do the compression, it's got to do the encoding. All of these things you can get these data points on. There's also some insight in here too, like especially when you have to get really nitty gritty about your model size and your refresh timing. Encoding is a common problem. Which way are you encoding your columns? This will spit out a warning at you if it's taking extra time to encode. So it's a great way to kind of look at that and look at your refresh speed and everything like that.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering as you were sharing it, because I don't see like a timestamp. I was like, can you figure out what parts are taking the longest? But you kind of built that into the background, is what you're saying. Is you notice something, or these couple parts that are taking long, you put a warning right in here.
That's right.
That's
cool.
cool.
And the logging tool will timestamp it as well.
Oh, there's the timestamp over on that side. Okay, that's what I was missing. It was lighter color.
Yeah. So what's very common for me is I put this, in the Azure DevOps pipeline.
Mhm.
And if I have to do any kind of like refreshing that's more dynamic based off of deployments and things like that, and I let the logs just sit there, so I can always go back and check them if I need anything that's going on. It gives me row counts. So it can be very helpful of like diagnosing it. And if you don't like logging, it's the built-in Python logger. You can turn the logs off. There's some documentation on it, which I can reference later. Let me go back down to the bottom. So
yeah, and so I wanted to also go back to like where you have the dot related
mhm.
on the tables. One thing, and maybe you've done this before, right? Is say you have that list of the 6 tables that are related to the other one. You saved it somewhere, and then you deploy. You can come back and recheck it, right? And say, make sure somebody didn't open up, like if they're doing it out of desktop or something like that, and do something with a table, and all of a sudden all the relationships went away,
Yeah.
right? You'd just have to update it if you're adding more, or you intentionally took a relationship away. But it
Yeah.
would be a way during deployment, and as you kind of mentioned, to automate and pipeline to do checks. And
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, it's iterable too. Like this table list, the column list, the measure list, it's all iterable.
Mhm.
So I can go, I just saved it as a variable. I'll push it up there, A equals in those related tables. So I can do for table in A, let's print table.name. And there we go. So you could do, let's say you needed to check in the same way you can use BPA. If you're more comfortable in Python, you could check like, is certain keys hidden? It's so I could do the same thing for table A, print table.is hidden. What's going on? Let me get rid of that. There we go. And none of them are hidden. But you can go from there, and you can add it all in, and you can change it up. So, okay, let's have some fun then. So I think I see
This hasn't been fun for you. This has been fantastic for me.
there's some more stuff that like other people have contributed to that's been fun to like watch as it comes in, and some other things that have been built. But yeah, okay, so.
Well, and we're excited that we are joined by the Scotcheroos queen.
All right.
Christina has popped in at the half-hour mark, so welcome.
Nobody
Christina.
has tasted them here yet, so I can claim that.
Yeah.
she just pops in when the fun starts.
Yes. Yeah.
I do.
She knew you were going to the fun stuff, and she wanted to be here for that, Curtis.
Good.
I am so excited for all this. This is super cool, Curtis.
Nothing like a black command console. Just I threw some purple and blue in there. Okay, so the next command I'm running, as this bumps up to the screen, is trace equals p.query monitor. So I see a comment on like SSMS profiler. There's tracing built into this. I have a few built-in ones, like the one you see in the refresh, and the one you see in the one I'll show now. And I think I have a couple others, but it's fully customizable because we bring in the .NET libraries and we're building on the backs of geniuses. This PyTabular uses a package called Pythonet, and that lets us connect to that .NET library. So that's why everything that you see in the documentation, which I'll link to in a bit, you have full access to it. So for in this case, I wrote a query monitor. I've set it up. I'm going to do trace.start. And then so it's starting. And what it's doing is it's just listening for queries. So let me go to I'm going to go in the background. I'm going to just refresh the Power BI report that's connected to this data set. And then boom. So it's a page full of a bunch of visuals. You can start to play Big Brother here. In the same way, if you're looking at log analytics, and you're looking at queries, if you just want a cool little, monitor, you can change the logging to output the actual DAX query. That would be insane in this example. But you can start to see like what's going on, who's doing what. If I was impersonating a user, you could see that. So you can really start to monitor and log like what's going on. all the things that are accessible in log analytics, or when you run SSMS profile, when you're running traces, you can see this in Python, and you can use it to your advantage. So yeah, and then just to be safe, I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to drop it. If for whatever reason you write the script so you forget to stop and drop your traces, there's built-in stuff in the background that when you exit your Python, it will automatically drop it for you before Python quits. So
isn't that a hip hop or rap song? Stop it, drop it.
Yeah.
Well, like that, right? Like,
I think then the reason
if it's not, like, someone needs to sample that and turn your stop it, drop it right into a song, right?
Well, I had to implement it too, because I ran into an issue where I'd forgotten to build that out, and then I logged in one day to the model, and I had like over 300 traces. I said, "Uh-oh, I better clean that up."
Whoops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next thing I'll show is something that one of the contributors, Don, had made, and I had nothing to do with it, and I love it, and it's very neat to use. But he had the use case where he basically needed some automated documentation. And so that's what he built into PyTabular. It's pretty customizable. I'll show the basics, but what it'll do is the few commands you need to bring in his class. So I'll just call it md equals p.model documenter. And then I'm going to give it my model argument. And then so I'll let you guys see that line right there. And then all I got to do is take that class, and I got to generate it first. Pages. And so that'll run. That's done. And then I got to save it. And you can specify file path. You can specify, the naming conventions of things. And then what it does is it takes all the attributes that it can find. Is hidden, name, description, expressions, things like that. And it'll save the results of markdown files. Now, I think it's tailored for if anybody's used Docusaurus as a tool. That's what it's tailored for. So you can start to see that, and I can show a preview if I've got that up. So now what I'll need to do then is switch over to the browser. So you got an amateur hour with live streaming. So let me see if I can switch this over.
Yeah, we didn't practice this ahead of time.
Yeah.
We'll do it live.
So I'm going to stop screen sharing this. And then I'm going to go
I think we need like a little Mandalorian, like this is the way.
And then, okay. And so now you should see a browser. And then I've just got VS Code on the browser. But what you see is how it's all formatted. You've got markdown file for each table with all the columns and the measures in it. The actual markdown code is on the right. And then the actual left is the actual markdown, and you could easily post this to a website or something like that. So that's the fun.
That looks really. Can you make the browser a little bit bigger? There you go.
Let me get rid of this, and then there you go. And so it's all in there. You can see the descriptions, stuff like that. And yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
The last thing, or actually no, because I already switched over, I'm not going to try to share my screen again. I've got other utilities as well that maybe I can go into in the documentation, but that in essence is PyTabular. I mean, you're looking at, it can refresh, it can run DAX queries. You can even, you can create measures with it. You can do anything with it. You really can, because you have the .NET libraries. My goal is just to make it more intuitive every time. So as you guys were talking, it's like .related .refresh, done, right? Model .query, it makes sense. So those are the kind of things that I try to do in it to make it as simple as possible. In the back end, you can fully access the .NET libraries and do anything that you could do in Tabular Editor, DAX Studio,
or your own C#. Now you don't have to.
Yeah, or your own C#.
That is so nice. Yeah.
So the simplicity is key. I think, like, going back to it, the use case here is, data engineering, it's not necessarily necessary for them to know C#. It is necessary for them to know Python, SQL, Spark. So like those kind of things they do know. So being able to hand this off to a data engineer and say, hey, model.refresh, and then
Done.
they'll go to town. And I said, just add that to the end of your pipeline, and then you can easily save feedback with the business or iteration with the business, because they now know they can now sleep at night knowing that final end of the chain is being produced for them. So okay, let's see.
So a question that I have, so obviously we've been showing it in the command line mode, and we kind of talked about putting it into pipelines and stuff. So obviously you could script out a whole bunch of things and just have it run that way. Have you also tried it in like a Fabric notebook? Is there anything that would stop it from working up there?
So here's where Semantic Link has the edge.
Ah,
this runs on Windows.
okay.
Oh,
So the use case there is Azure DevOps pipelines is really where I get my most use out of it. You can run, you pick any kind of hosted agent or your own, run Windows latest, and it'll run in there. That being said, if anybody's really smart and can help me get it running on Spark, I would love that. But until then, Windows only. You've got about 3.9, I think, is where I have my test for and up for Python versions. But yeah.
I do think part of the reason why Semantic Labs and Link and Senpai all work in like a Spark context is because they're not using C# for their backend. They're not calling the .NET packages. They're only calling REST APIs. So I could totally see why yours is not necessarily working yet.
Yeah. I don't have the stomach to try to tackle that because
no one does. They did, so none of us have to.
Yeah. So I think the last thing I can touch on is the repository itself, and some of the key things that have helped for the faster development and getting this up and running. Everybody loves pipelines. One of the key things that are in, like if I go into the actual code itself and I go into like the main PyTabular class, see if I make this a little bit bigger. One of the requirements that are getting checked on pull requests and things like that is documentation. So there are building on the back of the greats, right, of some of the great packages that are out there. I can easily check my code every time someone contributes or gets checked in that, hey, are we following specific documentation? So in here, what you see is like this follows a Google Docstring syntax. And so I can't confirm the quality, but I can confirm that they followed all the rules, right? And so what this does, because I have documentation in every spot, and it's following a specific syntax, I can then automatically generate my documentation in a website form. And that's what you see here. So this is built dynamically from the code itself, so I don't have to deal with a whole separate documentation page.
What?
And it's all click throughable. So like I'm in the tabular class, but then I can go to the PyTables and then see what methods and things I have available to me here. And then so like if I wanted to, there's a method called find 0 rows, or when's the last refresh, or query all the tables at once. All these different things. I can click to it. It gives me some stuff. And this is all built into the code itself, but it's still dynamic enough to where I can get cool little pop outs and things like that. And this is
so cool.
I did not design this from scratch. There's an open package. I'll have to find it, what it's called again, but it generates it all for me. So I've got automatic styling, automatic formatting for doc strings, so I can generate all of these things. I've also got an army of testing. I try to get 100% code coverage. I'm not quite there, but it is like I think I'm sitting at like 80 or 90% code coverage, and so that's what you can start to see in all these things. The last thing for this, let's go back. It's also it's all set up to publish to PyPI. So as soon as it is, the code's there and I click the button go, it'll automatically deploy to PyPI on the release when I create it. So that lets me just, kind of step away from this thing and just let it live on as the work comes through.
That's kind of the dream, isn't it? Yeah. To just be able to write the code instead of maintaining the documentation website. Like
Yes.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you're maintaining it, right? But while you're writing the code,
Yeah.
right? And so,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
always another good check, right? Because the comments need to match the code. And if they don't, they're both wrong.
Yeah, this is the YAML file for it. If anybody's curious, just to read the docs one, and they want to see what it's doing. But it's completely possible. It's completely doable. So then I can just focus on like, hey, let's make it work. The real magic, if I go into the source and then that DLL folder, and then here it is. So this is the beauty that lets me connect to it. And these same files exist in Tabular Editor, DAX Studio. My first version was actually copying it from DAX Studio.
Okay.
Just
Nice.
taking those exact files and saying, like, will it work? And it did. Thankfully. Yeah. To give DAX Studio a shout out, there is I have a file here, and I was curious one day, I was like, how does DAX Studio, when how does it find my local files? Like if
Yeah.
I've got a local data set, and there's a file in DAX Studio called like Power BI Helper, and it's in C#. And so what I did was I just stole that file and then rewrote it in Python. And then so this will do it too. So if you're doing something local, you can just copy that over, and you can use this. You can mess with your local data set. You can have some fun with it, and it'll connect to it and get all the info you need. So
That is so cool.
Yeah, that's neat.
So, and I'm sorry if this is maybe a little late in the live stream to be asking this, but I'm curious, what was kind of the spark that you were like, I want to do all this in Python? What kind of got you like, I don't want to deal with the C# or the DAX Studios of the world anymore?
I am definitely a fan of Python. I mean, it's so easy. I'm not saying I like Python because it's fast or I like Python because it's, the best language ever. I like it because it's simple.
Yeah.
And then it opens up who can use it. There's been use cases where you've got like a business user, but they took a Python course, and then I can start to give them these things, and maybe, I'm not saying this is a best practice, but maybe they need to export that DAX query.
Right.
And they need to get around the limit that Power BI will give you sometimes. PyTabular doesn't have that limit, and you can bring down a data set. I've done it, but you can, you can just query. You can build, they know how to do model.query, and they have their DAX query they want from Power BI. So I think the Python, there was a term, it's like a first-class citizen for
Yep.
Power BI I've
Mhm.
heard before. And I think that's where I hope Python goes as it gets a little closer to the specifically to the Power BI. I mean, it's taken over data engineering for sure.
Yeah.
But specifically with Power BI and interacting with it. So.
Well, I have a feeling that's where the evolution of Direct Lake is going. I don't know for a fact that the backend engine and backend is Python, but with all the changes that's going on with the elimination of the SQL endpoint there, like, I don't know, something there screams Python in the backend that we just can't see. So
Yeah, I think I'm interested to see where it heads. I think the stuff that you've put together here is only going to get more relevant, right?
yeah.
Are you also utilizing any of like the Tyndall stuff in here? I know that's really new. I would be shocked if you're like, yeah, I'm pulling that in.
No,
I'm curious if eventually that will make this even easier for you, like as far as like pulling back and interacting with models. But I don't know if that's, yeah.
You're asking in order to like make changes to your model?
Yes.
Yeah, so to be able to have to take a Tyndall script that you have, read it into your Python, and
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is I guess it's now officially a to-do list for it. But it's definitely something to get into to make it more flexible. The as long as it's, ideally it should be just, I guess the dream for it is so that, whatever someone envisions with it, it's possible. You
Right.
know, I don't have a goal to make this thing fast. The package is already extremely bloated. But I think when you're talking, I think last week you were making a comment of like the use case for like real time. This is very much a use case for my SLAs are like month end, quarter end, or daily.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so if I add 5 seconds to my pipeline, I don't care.
No.
Yeah.
Especially if that means I can check and say, hey, this data ties out, and then I can automate that report to the business user. Because, in my world, finance, they could care less what visual you use. Actually, they do
Yes.
care. It's a table, and then outside of that, they just want the data to tie out.
Yeah.
And
Is
that
it
is
a
the most
table or a matrix?
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
matrix.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well,
Very
and
cool.
like, to your point, this makes it really easy to even check that referential integrity, right? So you could query each of your dimensions and a value or two in your fact table, and then build out scripts that query, because it's Python, so you can then connect back to your Mart or your Lakehouse or whatever, and then do a comparison in data frames, and validate, yeah, all of my dimensions and all of the, I don't know, 184 dimensions on this one fact table are tying out and are consistent
Mhm.
with the historical values that we'd expect to have, or the source system values. And that's really hard to do if you don't have a framework like this, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some other methods in there too, if anybody wants to experiment with it, where you can, I have a method to easily download Tabular Editor,
Okay.
Yeah.
just because it is like useful, right? Tabular Editor is never going away. I feel like it's definitely here to stay. And so just having that, I forgot the method that's in there, but just download Tabular Editor and run BPA.
Nice.
But all within Python. So I think the goal is to like bridge that gap with the data engineers. So it's a lot easier for them.
Well, and then you only have to have one pack, or this becomes your primary DevOps pattern too. So
Mhm.
when someone's deploying a change, you run it, you do the BPA, you say, I don't know, I've got 5 new violations that crosses the threshold of, we only allow 1 new BPA violation per push, or whatever, right? Like, or you
Mhm.
send it back because there's
So,
ended, right?
so you just slowly instead of quick, like you can't do 5 in one.
Yeah, I know. Oftentimes, a big pain point, if you're bringing on a model and you want to add a new BPA rule, and then you're like, oh darn, I have a billion violations, and it can be
Mhm.
overwhelming for a lot of people. So you can start to what I'll start to do with in those situations with PyTabular is actually just run the test on the files that have been changed,
Mm.
and so then you can implement the rule in a go forward basis, because especially like it's that 180 gig model we were talking about, that was over I think like 300 tables at the time, like 4,000 columns or something, so you add a BPA rule, that's a lot of code to change to fix it.
Mhm.
So we
A
can do
lot
it
of
on a go
risk.
forward
Yeah.
basis, in this
Nice.
instance, which helps for the sanity of the developers for sure.
Oh, I don't think anyone's against driving tabular developers insane. Clearly, Microsoft is for that, so
Yeah.
that's not a problem.
True.
Yeah. um, awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, Curtis, this has just been absolutely fantastic. I mean, we're seeing all sorts of people commenting in the chat about how great this is. Uh, what do you see as like a next step or a next thing that you want to do with this engine?
Well, hearing the Team DL argument, I definitely need to do that. I would love to get this working on uh, Fabric or like Spark. But that would be kind of I need some smart people to help me out with that one. Um,
I'm not smart enough.
I keep
Sorry.
bumping my head against the wall.
Well, I will say that there's a case for that, but there's also a case for supporting legacy, because the legacy has the more holistic integrations with the tabular engine. And that's why like the browser based tabular model management isn't as rich as the Power BI desktop or the tabular editor interface, is because those are using the legacy Windows based interactions, and the online is locked into using the APIs. And because the APIs don't support everything that the on-prem does, they can't do that until they get parity. So the advantage of being on-prem is you have 100% of everything when it comes to managing a model is accessible to it. The chat and APIs isn't. So I don't think I think it's a nice thing to have both. And in fact, that might be another reason why, hey, if you're using Semantic Link Labs, you might also need to be using this, because there's inherent gaps in Semantic Link Labs that can't be closed, that this can close.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there, Chris, right? I'm kind of thinking if you moved it up into the Fabric notebooks or whatever, whether it was Python or PySpark, it would almost feel like you'd start competing with Semantic Link and Semantic Link Labs. I kind of like this in the use case of like kind of what you were showing, right? If you need to do something quickly off your own command line, or definitely I could see a huge advantage in the DevOps pipelines.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah, it's a good point. I appreciate that. It's like, was it the Star Schema book? Everything is a business decision with technical implications.
Yes.
A whole book about data modeling, but they talk a lot about how to make design decisions. And oftentimes what the business needs is something quick.
Yeah.
They just need it today. And that is where PyTabular does come in handy. So I guess if you see it in an environment somewhere, that means someone had to make a quick decision. But it does help glue things together and get you to the next step and get you to the next phase for sure.
Yeah. And to be clear, this is all open source, so people can go out and download it and use it. And if you have a gap, I was just looking at it. You've had contributors to this, right? So you're not the only guy who's helping with changes here. So if there's something that you want done, heck, it's Python, it's open source. You can see the code. Put in is it pull request? Is it a
pull yeah. You could fork the library. You could fork it, and then you could do a pull request, and you could do all kinds of fun stuff. And
I fully recognize my code is not the best, so definitely get in there and make it better, please. I keep having to stare at my own code, which is never fun.
Does it work?
It does work.
Then it's the best.
Yeah.
There's no other criteria.
Yeah.
So I mean, for all those autistics who are out there looking for something to do this weekend, who's just like looking for some fun, like code refactoring, to go ahead and take a look at this. So awesome. All right. Well, we are nearly at the end of the day. Curtis, I want to thank you very much for not just joining us, but putting all the time and effort it takes to have a public repo out there and making that available so that the community can benefit from this. I think that's just an incredible resource that we now all have access to, because you took the time out of your life to do this. So thank you very much.
Hey,
so before we leave, was Christina going to give us the recipe?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it on my GitHub because I can't put it in the YouTube chat.
Oh wait, you're gonna open source the recipe, and then we could do pull request on the GitHub to change that.
No recommendations allowed.
Gonna lock it down.
Yeah, this is a locked repo.
It might just be locked because I don't know how to merge requests in GitHub. Nobody can do
Oh,
anything. Yeah.
oh, good deal. Good deal. All right, Curtis, we'll give you the last word. What would you, what words of advice would you give to people who are watching the live stream today?
Oh man. Don't waste your time.
There you
There you
go.
go.
Be efficient.
Love it.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you guys all so very much for joining us on the goodest and bestest of Fridays. We really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day, out of your lives to come be part of this conversation. All of us, I could speak for, I know I could speak for Kevin, Curtis, and Christina. We do this because of you, and we love talking about this stuff. And so we're so grateful for you guys to be here. You guys have the best weekend ever. Peace.
Peace.
Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.